Taru had never felt this drained in her entire life. Her head pounded and her legs were on fire. She wasn't even aware brains could feel as foggy as hers did now, the relentless survival exercise wearing her down. Her claws itched, her fur matted with sweat. It was only by the brief rest periods that her team hadn't fallen apart completely. The human drill sergeant, Kellen Marks, had mentioned something about mental resilience before they were dropped on this hostile planet, but Taru had dismissed it then. Now, under the blazing orange sun of Igrax Prime, her body craved sleep, and her mind teetered on the edge of collapse. The planet's harsh terrain was jagged and arid, stretching endlessly. Survival Exercise 38, they called it. More like torture disguised as training. Taru sat with her squad of aliens, barely breathing in the heavy, dusty air. Her squad members were in various stages of exhaustion, their high-tech gear battered from the relentless environment. The neural combat implants that the humans kept talking about, still a mystery to her. The PO, the small, elf-like aliens known for their agility and mastery of technology, were equally confused. Taru looked over at Vekel, the PO beside her, who was staring into the distance, his normally sharp eyes dulled by fatigue. Zelen, the shortest of the PO, rubbed his slender fingers against his temple. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Why do humans think this is training? This is madness." Taru grunted in agreement. Humans were an odd species, no doubt. Even the Carlin, known for their reptilian toughness, seemed rattled. Siren, with his hooded cobra-like head, stood tall despite the weight of exhaustion, his slitted eyes narrowed in quiet frustration. His claws twitched as he studied the humans who were calmly sitting across the makeshift camp, looking oddly relaxed given the situation. "I don't understand them," Siren hissed, flexing his tail to relieve the tension in his body. "How are they so calm? This environment is death itself, and yet, look at them. Barely a drop of sweat." Across the campfire, Sergeant Alara Beck was giving instructions to the human recruits, her voice calm, authoritative. She hadn't even broken a sweat, her pale skin only slightly flushed under the heat. Taru had noticed it too. Humans seemed different. They had some secret, and Taru was determined to find out what it was. Adaptation, Beck had said earlier in the day. It's not about strength. It's not about technology. It's about adapting faster than the enemy can. And when you run out of options, you make new ones. Vecta, one of the other Carlin, hissed under his breath. "We're supposed to survive here for another 3 days." How did they expect us to last before Taru could reply? The radio crackled to life. "Sergeant." Mark's voice came through, sharp and commanding all units, brace for incoming. "We've detected a hostile force approaching." Defensive positions. Immediately Taru's heart raced. A hostile force? How were they supposed to defend themselves? They were supposed to be training, not engaging in combat. She glanced at Vekel, whose eyes widened in panic. Siren's muscles tensed, and the normally stoic Carlin let out a low hiss. This isn't part of the exercise, is it?" The humans didn't seem fazed. Beck stood up, her neural implant glowing faintly at her temple as she accessed the tactical overlay through her mind. "Position," she barked. The human recruits moved quickly, like a well-oiled machine, setting up makeshift defenses in moments. They didn't even need to speak, they moved as one, their neural implants syncing them into a single cohesive unit. Taru's ears twitched as she realized what was happening. The neural implants. That's what gave them this eerie coordination. The humans didn't need external armor or flashy tech, they had something far more advanced. Their armor wasn't physical, it was mental. It allowed them to anticipate enemy movements, communicate non-verbally, and react faster than any species Taru had ever encountered. Zelen noticed too. "There. Linked," he muttered in awe. "That's how they're doing it. It's not just training, it's their implants. They're processing information in real time." Suddenly, a wave of hostile creatures erupted from the jagged rocks beyond their camp. The creatures were fast, with slick, black exoskeletons and glowing red eyes. Taru barely had time to react before one lunged at her, but Beck was faster. The sergeant fired off a precise shot, taking the creature down with a single round to its head. "Stick with us," Waipal Beck said to Taru, her eyes glinting with a strange confidence. "You'll survive if you learn to think like us." Taru gritted her teeth. She didn't have the human implants, and neither did her team, but that didn't mean they were useless. "Team, fall," and she barked to her squad, trying to get control of the situation. The Jinn, their warlike alien companions, took up positions next to her. Korvath, the Jinn leader, grinned behind his fearsome mask. "Finally, a fight worth my time," he growled, his forearms flexing as he readied his blade. The battle was chaos. The hostile creatures swarmed them from all sides, and Taru's squad was barely holding the line. The humans, meanwhile, were everywhere fast, coordinated, reacting to every threat as if they could see it coming before it happened. Beck moved like lightning, her implant guiding her every shot. But it wasn't enough. The creatures kept coming, and soon, Taru's squad was being overwhelmed. Siren was slashing wildly at a group of them, his movements growing more desperate by the second. Zelen was pinned down, his light armor dented and scorched. Vecta's leg had been sliced open, and he was dragging himself behind cover. And then, suddenly, Taru felt something strange, a sharp pain at the base of her skull. Before she could react, her vision blurred, and then it sharpened crystal clear. Information flooded her mind: enemy positions, tactical suggestions, the terrain around her, and she knew immediately what had happened. The humans had synced her neural implant with theirs. For a moment, the overload of data was dizzying, but then she focused. She could feel the human soldiers moving around her as if they were extensions of her own body. They weren't just individuals, they were a collective, each one enhancing the other's awareness and efficiency. And now, Taru was part of it. With renewed clarity, she leapt back into action. Her claws slashed through one of the creatures as she ducked and rolled, dodging another's attack. She didn't have to think, the implant did that for her. Every movement felt perfectly timed, every action exactly what was needed. She could hear Beck's voice in her head now. "Stay focused, Waipal. You're part of the unit now." Taru grinned despite herself. For the first time, she truly understood why humans were feared across the stars. It wasn't their physical strength or their weapons, it was their ability to adapt, to become more than the sum of their parts. The neural combat implants weren't just tech, they were evolution. By the time the last creature fell, Taru was panting heavily, her fur matted with sweat, but she was alive. More than that, she had survived, not because of her armor or weapons, but because she had learned to fight like a human. As the dust settled, Sergeant Beck approached her, her face calm, as always. "Not bad, Waipal. You held your ground." Taru nodded, still catching her breath. You synced me into your network." Beck smirked. "Figured you could use a little human ingenuity. Welcome to the team." Taru glanced at her squad, battered, bruised, but alive. They had survived because of the humans, and because they had learned to adapt, just like them. Siren slithered up beside her, his scales glinting in the fading light. "I am confident," he hissed quietly, "that I will never understand these humans." Taru chuckled softly. "Neither will I, but I think we'll be better for it." As the group limped back toward camp, Taru looked up at the twin moons rising above the hostile planet. For the first time, she felt something she hadn't expected. The next few days on HFY Prime were no easier, but they were different now. Taru's body still ached, her fur still matted with dust and sweat, and the hostile creatures that roamed the barren landscape didn't give them a moment of peace. But something had shifted within her. Ever since the humans had synced her neural implant with their network, the world felt clearer. She had felt the change as soon as Sergeant Elara Beck had brought her into their neural net. It was as if her instincts had sharpened, her senses attuned to everything around her in ways she had never experienced before. The humans had access to something far more powerful than mere physical strength or high-tech armor. They possessed the ability to think collectively, adapt to challenges at a speed no other species could match, and process information in real time. And now, Taru could too. The PO, with their advanced technology and slim builds, were the least comfortable with the mental integration. Vekal seemed to have taken the neural sync as a personal offense, muttering under his breath at every opportunity. It's invasive. It's like I can hear their thoughts, feel their presence. It's unnatural, not just thoughts, Taru responded as they moved through the rocky terrain, her eyes scanning the horizon for threats. It's strategy. Coordination. I wasn't sure about it at first either, but it's kept us alive, hasn't it? Vekal shook his head, still unsettled. They think differently from us. It's like they're constantly shifting, constantly adapting. We're used to relying on our tools and our planning, but these humans, they rely on each other. They're unpredictable. Siren, ever the observer, slithered closer to them, his hooded head bobbing slightly as he spoke. Perhaps unpredictability is the strength of humans. Their minds move faster than we anticipated. We cling to what we know are armor or weapons, but they. He glanced toward the human recruits, who were moving through the terrain with ease, scanning for threats as if it were second nature. They are the weapon. The group paused near a cluster of jagged rocks, where Sergeant Kellen Marks had signaled them to take a breather. His neural implant flashed faintly at his temple as he synced up the latest terrain data from the drone overhead, sent to scout the area for more hostile life forms. As they huddled behind cover, hostile life forms everywhere, and yet they moved through it like it's a stroll in the park. Taru couldn't help but agree. Even now, her own nerves were frayed, her muscles exhausted. But the humans seemed almost calm. She watched Beck, who was crouched at the front of the group, scanning the horizon with her visor. The humans' neural network meant they could share sensory data. Beck's eyes in a way were everyone's eyes. Confident, Siren said, his voice low, almost a hiss. They have it. We don't. Taru nodded, still breathing hard from their last sprint to the rocks. But we're learning, she said, wiping her snout with the back of her paw. We're adapting. Just like they do. Just as the momentary peace settled over them, a high-pitched beep sounded in their implants, an alert from Sergeant Marks. His voice crackled into their ears through the neural network. Enemies incoming. 4 clicks west, moving fast. Defensive positions. The whole team, human and alien, sprang into action. Taru felt it before she even saw it through the neural network. She could sense the enemy approaching, feel the tension spike through the group. It wasn't a conscious thought, but a shared awareness, a collective readiness that sharpened her focus. The hostiles burst from the ridgeline, black exoskeletons glinting in the pale sunlight. The creatures were faster this time, larger, with thicker armor. Korvath, the Jinn leader, growled in excitement, flexing his forearms and unsheathing his twin blades. Finally, something worth killing, he shouted through the neural link, charging forward with a roar. Whole Beck's voice rang in Taru's mind. Let them come to us. Defensive formation. The PO, led by Vekal, darted to higher ground, setting up their energy rifles to snipe the advancing creatures. The Karlan, Siren, and Vecta braced themselves near the front, their claws ready to tear into the hostiles. Taru and the other Ipol took up positions in between the humans, their neural implants buzzing with shared tactical data. As the first wave of creatures reached them, the humans moved in perfect sync, their combat efficiency unmatched. Shots rang out, precise and deadly. As Beck's unit cut down the attackers with a calm focus, Taru found herself moving with them, her instincts merging with the data flowing through the neural network. Every move she made felt guided, natural, like she was no longer just fighting for herself but part of a larger, more dangerous force. The creatures fell quickly, but not without leaving their mark. Vecta, the Karlan, was hit hard, a claw ripping through his side. Siren was by his side in an instant, holding off the next attacker as Vecta hissed in pain, retreating behind the rocks. Taru's neural implant immediately flashed the tactical suggestion to cover the Karlan's retreat, and she acted without hesitation, leaping in front of Siren to drive back the advancing creature with a swipe of her claws. Taru felt a pulse of approval from Beck's networked mind. Good work, Ipal. Keep moving despite the chaos. Taru felt a strange sense of control. She moved with the flow of the battle, every step calculated, every strike precise. The neural implant made it so that she wasn't fighting alone. She was part of the human unit now, part of something far greater than herself. The last of the creatures fell with a gurgling hiss, its exoskeleton cracking under a final shot from Zelen. The battlefield was littered with the remains of the enemy, the smell of burnt flesh thick in the air. Sergeant Marks signaled the all clear, and the group relaxed, but only slightly. The threat had passed for now, but on Igrax Prime, peace never lasted long. Beck stepped forward, surveying the battlefield, her expression unreadable behind the visor. "Another day," she said, glancing at the aliens in her squad. "You're improving. But it's not just about survival out here. It's about adaptation. You think like soldiers now, but to win, you'll have to think like us." Taru wiped the sweat from her brow, her fur clinging to her skin. She understood now what Beck meant. It wasn't enough to endure. It wasn't even enough to fight. The humans had adapted, not by evolving better weapons or armor, but by evolving their minds. They fought as one, thought as one. And now, so did she. As the team regrouped, Veckel muttered something, still uneasy with the neural network. "I don't like being in their heads," Taru chuckled, glancing at the PO with a slight grin. "Neither did I, at first. But now. I wouldn't trade it for anything." Vecta, recovering from his wounds, gave her a sidelong glance. "Still feels wrong, like we're giving up part of ourselves." Siren, ever the calm strategist, slithered beside them, his hood folding back slightly as he let out a long breath. "Perhaps it's not about losing ourselves, but about becoming something." More Taru's gaze wandered back to Beck and the humans, still strategizing for their next move. She thought about everything she'd been through since arriving on Igrax Prime, about how the humans had faced the same challenges but never wavered. They were different, yes. Their strength wasn't just in their muscles or their armor, it was in their minds. And now, Taru realized, so was hers. As the twin suns of Igrax Prime set on the horizon, casting the planet in a deep orange glow, Taru felt a deep sense of unity, not just with her squad, but with the humans too. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were a team. The nights on Igrax Prime were almost worse than the days. The orange glow of the twin suns gave way to a deep, eerie darkness where only the faint glow of the moons illuminated the landscape. Every sound seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. Taru and her squad huddled in a makeshift camp, their eyes constantly scanning the perimeter for movement. They knew the hostile creatures that roamed the planet could strike at any moment. But tonight, there was something different in the air. Something quiet. Taru sat cross-legged beside the fire, sharpening her blade, a habit she had picked up from Korvath, the fierce Jinn leader who seemed to find joy in every fight. Korvath was still awake, of course, sitting across from her with his arms folded and his mask tipped slightly upward, allowing him to eat without removing it entirely. His beast-like mask caught the firelight, casting sharp shadows on the ground. "Quiet tonight," Korvath growled, his deep voice reverberating through his mask. "Too quiet. I prefer when there's something to kill," Taru chuckled, shaking her head. "You'd prefer every night to be like that." Korvath's eyes gleamed from behind the mask. "Yes, I would." Veckel was further back, adjusting his Poe energy rifle with nimble fingers, still muttering to himself about the neural link. Siren, as always, was resting in a low crouch, his eyes half closed but fully aware of his surroundings. He never seemed to let his guard down. The Carlin were like that, always alert, always cautious. Sergeant Alara Beck approached the fire, her steps as quiet and controlled as ever. Despite the intensity of their training, she never showed signs of exhaustion. She carried herself with the same confidence she always had, and Taru couldn't help but admire her for it. Beck had become a kind of guide for Taru, teaching her to think like a human, to anticipate like a human. And while the others were still uncomfortable with the mental link, Taru had come to rely on it. Beck sat down beside her, her neural implant flashing briefly as she connected to the squad's network. "How's your head, Yupal?" You've been handling the sync better than the others, Taru nodded, her fingers pausing over the blade she was sharpening. It's strange, but it's useful. It's like I can feel you all, even when you're not close by. Beck smiled faintly, her sharp features softened by the flickering light. That's the point. Humans have always been about community. We fight better when we think as one. Taru thought back to her early days on Igrax Prime, how lost she had felt. The discomfort of the neural implant had made her resent the humans, but now she understood. It wasn't just about survival. It was about trust. Before Taru could respond, a low hum crackled through their neural link, followed by Sergeant Kellen Mark's voice. Incoming data from the drone. You're going to want to see this. Beck's implant flared again as she pulled up the tactical feed directly into the squad's minds. Taru saw it too. A massive energy signature was detected just beyond the ridge, something far larger than the creatures they had been fighting. Can you enhance the visuals? Beck asked, her tone sharp and focused. The drone's feed zoomed in, revealing a massive structure rising from the ground. Taru's breath caught in her throat. The structure wasn't natural. It was metallic, towering like some ancient ruin that had been buried for centuries beneath the planet's surface. That's not local, Siren muttered, his cold reptilian gaze narrowing. It's alien. Looks abandoned, Korvath added, though there was a gleam of excitement in his voice. But I'd bet there's something worth fighting in there. Vekel, however, wasn't as enthusiastic. We should be cautious. Who knows what kind of traps or tech could still be active? Beck stood, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. This could be important. We're moving out, she nodded at Taru. You've been synced long enough to lead. Take point. Taru swallowed hard, but she nodded. This was at the moment she had been trained for. She wasn't just a follower anymore. She had the trust of the humans and the responsibility of leading both her alien squad and the human soldiers. They moved in silence, the neural network allowing them to communicate without a word. Taru felt their presence, their thoughts. Beck was calm and confident. Siren was calculating. Korvath was eager for combat, and Vekel was always anxious, always overthinking. As they crept closer to the structure, the ground beneath their feet began to shift, revealing ancient alien technology embedded deep in the soil. The metal walls of the structure were scorched and weathered, as though they had been through some kind of catastrophic event. The air around them felt charged with energy. Taru motioned for the team to stop. Her neural implant flashed as she relayed the command through the network. Beck, what do you make of this? Beck knelt beside her, her hand tracing the strange symbols etched into the metallic walls. It's old, maybe centuries, but the energy readings are spiking. This thing isn't dead, Vekel's voice crackled into their minds. We shouldn't go any further. If this thing reactivates, we could be dealing with something far worse than the creatures. Taru hesitated. He wasn't wrong. But something in the back of her mind, something tied to the neural network, pulled her forward. A strange feeling, almost like intuition, but stronger. It was as if she could sense something inside the structure, something powerful. Before she could make a decision, a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. The metallic doors of the structure began to groan and creak, and Taru's heart pounded in her chest. They had activated something. Siren, Korvath, cover the rear, Taru ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Beck, Vekel, stay with me. We need to find out what's inside. The team split up, moving with precision. Taru's paws felt heavy as she led Beck and Vekel through the massive doors, into the heart of the structure. The air inside was thick with dust, the faint hum of machinery vibrating through the walls. Then, suddenly, the entire structure lit up. Panels along the walls blinked to life, and the ground beneath their feet began to glow with intricate lines of energy. This isn't just some old ruin, Vekel whispered, his eyes wide. It's a control center. Taru felt it too. Her neural implant pulsed, reacting to the technology around them. It was as if the entire structure was connected, part of something far larger than they realized. Beck approached the central console, her fingers hovering over the interface. There's a signal here. Something's transmitting, but I can't pinpoint where Taru's head spun. The energy in the room was overwhelming. Whatever this place was, it had been designed to interface with the mind. It wasn't just technology, it was alive, in a way, feeding off their presence. "We need to leave," Vekel insisted, backing away from the console. "This is too dangerous," but before anyone could move, the ground shook again, and a voice not from their neural network, but from the structure itself rumbled through the air. "Intruders. You have awakened the Ancient Ones." The team froze. Taru's heart raced as she glanced at Beck, her neural implant buzzing with an overwhelming sense of urgency. They had stumbled into something far beyond their understanding. And whatever they had awakened, it was coming for them. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel. For every comment that says, we will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.